The moment my son introduced her to me, she looked me up and down the way you'd assess a piece of furniture you weren't sure belonged in the room. Her name was Cassandra. She was 31 years old, had a master's degree in art history from Georgetown, and she carried herself like she'd been born knowing exactly what everything in the world was worth, including people. My son Finn was 34. He'd been with her for 2 years before he brought her home to meet me, which already told me something. 2 years is a long time to keep a father waiting. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I'm not a man who makes quick judgments. I spent 31 years as a structural engineer, the last 12 running my own firm out of Columbus, Ohio. I built bridges for a living. Literal ones. You don't do that job without learning how to read load-bearing capacity, how to spot a flaw buried inside something that looks perfectly solid from the outside. I know how to be patient. I know how to look twice before I decide. I looked twice. 3 times, actually. Cassandra didn't like me. I couldn't tell you exactly why, and honestly, in those early months, I wasn't even sure it was personal. Some people just have a way of making you feel like you're standing in the wrong room. She had that quality. When she talked at dinner, she angled her chair toward Finn and away from me, just slightly, maybe 2 or 3 degrees, but enough. When I told stories about the early days of the firm, she smiled at the right moments, but her eyes went somewhere else. Polite enough to pass. Distant enough to sting. Finn didn't see it, or he saw it and decided not to name it. That's a choice too. My wife Susan passed 9 years ago. Ovarian cancer, 17 months from diagnosis to the end. Finn was 25. He took it hard in a way that quiet people take things hard. He went inward, got very still, and didn't talk about her for a long time after. She was the kind of woman who filled up a room just by being glad to be in it, and when she left, the room stayed empty for years. I understand why he was drawn as someone confident, someone who knew her own mind. I do understand that. I just wish the confidence hadn't come with so much sharp edge. When Finn called to tell me they were engaged, I was standing in my kitchen making a grilled cheese sandwich. It was a Tuesday in October, around 6:30 in the evening. I remember that specific detail because it's strange, the things your brain photographs when it knows something is going to matter. I told him congratulations. I meant it. I asked when. He said next September. I asked where. He said a venue outside of Cincinnati she'd already found. I waited for him to ask if I wanted to be involved in the planning. He didn't ask. I told myself that was fine. Over the following months, Cassandra's mother, a woman named Rochelle, became the gravitational center of every wedding decision. I know because Finn told me, in passing, the way he mentioned most things that he suspected might bother me. Quickly, gently, already moving past it. Rochelle had opinions about the florist, the caterer, the table linens. She flew in from Atlanta twice to visit venues. I was not invited to either trip. When I asked Finn at Christmas whether there was anything he needed from me, he said they had it covered. I want to be careful here. I don't think Finn is a bad man. I think he's a man who loves a strong-willed woman and has learned that the path of least resistance keeps the peace. I've watched other men make that same calculation, and I understand it even when I grieve it. What I didn't understand, not until it was already happening, was how far the path of least resistance would take him from me. The wedding was on a Saturday in mid-September. The venue was a restored estate about 40 minutes east of Cincinnati, the kind of place with white fences and old oak trees and a barn they'd converted into a reception hall. Genuinely beautiful. I'll give Cassandra that. I drove down the night before and stayed at a Holiday Inn about 15 minutes from the venue. I'd offered to stay with Finn at the house he and Cassandra were renting together, but he said things were hectic, which I translated correctly. The morning of the wedding, I got a text from Finn at 8:47. Hey Dad, ceremony starts at 3. Head to the venue around 2:30. Love you. That was the text. Not, can you come earlier? Not, I want a few minutes with you before. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed with my phone in my hand and read it 4 times. I got dressed slowly. I'd bought a new suit, navy, from a tailor on High Street who'd made clothes for me for 15 years. I stood in the bathroom mirror and tied my tie twice because I wasn't satisfied with the first attempt. I thought about Susan. I thought about the way she would have handled this whole situation. She would have brought some casserole over to Cassandra's mother and charmed her completely before the second bite. That was her gift. Mine was something different. I arrived at 2:20. A young woman with a clipboard directed me to a holding area near the main building where family members were gathering. I recognized Cassandra's aunt from a photo Finn had shown me and I introduced myself. She was warm, Most people are, when their guard is down. Rochelle found me about 10 minutes later. She was a tall woman, silver-haired, wearing a dress the color of champagne. She had the same quality as her daughter, a precision to her eye when she looked at you, like she was filing you under a category she'd already decided on. "You must be Finn's dad," she said. "I am. It's a beautiful setup you've done here." She smiled. "We worked very hard on it. We. Not they. We." She excused herself a few minutes later. I watched her move through the crowd, stopping to embrace people, laughing, adjusting the boutonniere on a nephew's lapel. She was good at the performance of warmth. I noted that. Finn found me about 20 minutes before the ceremony. He looked handsome and terrified, the way grooms do. He hugged me and I held on a beat longer than he expected. He didn't pull away from it. "You okay?" I asked. Yeah, I'm good." "You're going to be great," I told him. And I meant that too. He had to go. Something about the photographer wanting a first look shot. He gave me another hug, shorter this time, and was gone. I found my seat inside. Third row, left side. Not the front row, I noticed that, but I sat down without saying anything and told myself it didn't matter. The ceremony was the thing. And the ceremony was beautiful. Whatever I think about Cassandra, and whatever I've had to process about those years, she was a stunning bride. Finn cried when he saw her come down the aisle. I cried a little myself, thinking about his mother. The reception was in the converted barn. Round tables, soft string lights overhead, a jazz quartet setting up in the corner. My assigned seat was at a table toward the middle of the room, not at the family table, which was a long rectangular one near the stage, where Rochelle and her husband sat with Cassandra's siblings and their spouses. I sat with a cousin of Cassandra's I'd never met, a college friend of Finn's whose name I knew from stories but whose face was new to me, and a couple who were neighbors of Rochelle's. Nice enough people. But I want you to understand the geography of that room, because geography matters. I was a 45-minute drive from the family table. That's not an accident. Seating charts at weddings are deliberate documents. Dinner was served, and the toasts began. Rochelle gave one. It was long and lovely, and almost entirely about Cassandra, her childhood, her tenacity, her sophistication. There were lines about Finn, kind ones, but they came near the end, like a generous tip. Cassandra's sister gave a toast. Finn's college roommate gave a toast. There was no toast from me. Finn had not asked me, and I had not been told to prepare one. I sat with my hands in my lap and listened and clapped when everyone else clapped. Here is the moment I want to tell you about. After the main course, there was a lull while the caterers cleared plates, and the band shifted into dancing music. Finn came to find me at my table. His face when he approached was the face of a man navigating a minefield he himself had laid. I'd known that face since he was 16. "Hey, Dad, do you want to come say hi to Cassandra's grandparents? They're at the head table." "Of course," I said. I followed him toward the front of the room. The family table was long, stretched across the stage platform. As we got closer, I saw 2 empty chairs near the far end. Someone had stepped away. Finn pulled one out for me, gestured for me to sit. For a brief second, I thought this was a new beginning, that he was offering me a seat at the table that had been denied to me for months. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong about the distance I felt. That he was bridging it, here, in front of everyone. I began to lower myself into the chair. It slid away. Not dramatically. Not violently. Just gone. As if the floor had changed its mind about being solid. My body, all 62 years and one bad knee of it, went down onto the hardwood floor of that reception barn. I hit my elbow on the chair edge on the way down, and the sound of it, the sound of an old man falling, cut through the jazz music just enough for the nearest tables to turn. Finn had a hand on his mouth. His face had gone white. Cassandra, who had been 15 feet away, looked over. For a moment, her expression was unreadable. Then she looked at Finn, and then she looked away. I don't know if it was an accident. I've thought about this for over a year now, and I genuinely do not know. The chair might have simply moved on an uneven section of floor. Finn might have let it go without thinking, or it might have been exactly what it looked like, a small, plausibly deniable cruelty, the kind of thing you can always call a mistake. What I know is this: no one from that table came to help me up. The man who came to help me up was someone I had never met before that night. He was seated one table over to my left. He was in his late 60s, barrel-chested, with the handshake of a man who built things. He came around the table quickly, got a hand under my arm, and helped me back to my feet with the calm efficiency of someone who had no patience for the moment being anything other than practical. Once I was standing, he didn't let go right away. He looked at me directly. "Sir," he said, "are you all right?" And there was something in his voice. Not pity, not theater, just honest, human concern. I had to blink a couple of times to answer him. I think so, I said. "Thank you." "I'm Hugh Merritt," he said. "My firm did the electrical contracting on this venue about 6 years back. Small world." He handed me a folded cocktail napkin. My elbow was bleeding a little where I'd caught the chair. His wife, a quiet woman who'd come over behind him, put her hand briefly on my arm. I looked over at Finn. He was still standing where he'd been. Still white-faced. Cassandra had resumed a conversation with her sister. I thanked Hugh Merritt again, picked at the cocktail napkin, and walked back to my table in the middle of the room. I sat down. I finished my glass of water. I watched my son have his first dance with his wife, and I clapped with everyone else when it ended. I drove back to the Holiday Inn at 9:15 that night. The party was still going. Finn texted me the next morning. "Hey, I'm so sorry about last night. The floor near the stage is uneven. Are you okay?" I read the text. I typed back, "I'm fine. Take care of yourself." Then I put the phone down and went to get breakfast. I want to tell you about the weeks that followed, because this is the part of the story people sometimes skip over. The part between the event and whatever comes after. That in-between time is where you learn the most about yourself. I'm a man who built a company on clear-eyed assessment. I don't make decisions angry, and I don't move fast when the stakes are high. After I got home from Cincinnati, I spent about 2 weeks just thinking. Walking in the mornings, which I do most days. Sitting with a cup of coffee in the evenings, not stewing. Thinking. I thought about what I wanted from my relationship with my son, and I thought about what that relationship actually was. I thought about the seat at the wedding. The text I'd gotten instead of a phone call. The 9 months of wedding planning in which I had been functionally decorative. I thought about the fact that my son had stood 15 feet away while a stranger helped his father off the floor. I didn't want revenge. I want to say that plainly, because the word has a kind of heat to it that doesn't match what I actually felt. What I wanted was clarity. I wanted things to be named. I called Finn the following Thursday evening. He picked up on the second ring. "I want to talk to you," I said. "Not over the phone. Can you come to Columbus?" There was a pause. "Cassandra has." "Just you," I said. "This is a conversation I need to have with you directly." He came the following Saturday. I made lunch, nothing elaborate. Sandwiches and soup from scratch the way Susan used to make on fall weekends. We sat at the kitchen table where he'd eaten breakfast for 18 years. I told him what I had observed. Not dramatically. Not with raised voice. I told him about the seating chart. The toast I hadn't been asked to give. The 18 months of planning in which I'd been kept at arm's length. I told him about the moment on the floor and what it felt like to be helped up by a man I'd never met while my son stood still. Finn sat with his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he didn't say it wasn't true. He said, "I didn't realize how it looked from your side." I told him that how it looked was the least of my concerns, that what mattered was how it was. He was quiet for a long time after that. "I love her, Dad," he said finally. "I know you do," I said, "and I want you to have a good marriage. That's not what I'm questioning." "Then what are you questioning?" "I'm asking you," I said carefully, "whether there's any version of your marriage in which your father exists." He looked up at me then, and I saw it, the thing he'd been not seeing for a long time, the recognition of what had been slowly, quietly happening. He didn't have an answer for me that day. He drove back to Cincinnati. We texted a few times over the next month. Brief, careful exchanges. Then he called me on a Tuesday evening in November, and his voice when he picked up was different, cleared. Somehow, he told me that he and Cassandra had been in couples counseling since the week after the wedding, that he had finally told her what I told him, that she had pushed back, hard, at first, but that the counselor had helped them get to a place where some things could actually be seen. "She wants to talk to you," Finn said, "if you're open to it." I thought about that for a moment. "I'm open to it," I said. The conversation with Cassandra happened at a restaurant in Columbus 2 weeks later, just the three of us. She was different. Not softer exactly, but less armored. She told me, in the particular careful way of someone who has been coached through something in therapy and is trying to make it real, that she had felt threatened by how much of Finn's sense of self came from me. That she had handled that feeling badly. She didn't say she was sorry in so many words, but she said enough that the not saying wasn't the point. I listened. I nodded. I told her I wanted to know her better. That I wasn't looking for an apology, just a chance. We didn't become close overnight. I want to be honest about that because I've heard enough versions of these stories where everything wraps up clean, and that's not life. It's been slow. There have been dinners that went well, and phone calls that were stiff, and a Christmas in Columbus last year that was genuinely good. Cassandra made her grandmother's sweet potato pie and brought the recipe in a handwritten card because she knew I liked to cook. I frame it on the wall now, not the recipe itself. The card, because what's in the card is the beginning of an honest effort, and that is not a small thing. Here's what I would tell any man in my position, standing in that hotel room the morning after, rereading a text he'd hoped would be a phone call: do not disappear. I know the instinct. When you've been made to feel like you take up too much space, the most dignified seeming response is to make yourself smaller, to pull back, to stop asking for things. But that's not dignity. That's surrender. And the people you love don't grow from your surrender. They grow from your presence, your willingness to say the true thing out loud even when it costs you something. My son is not a bad man. He got lost for a while in the way that people who want to please everyone sometimes do, by forgetting to protect the people who need no performance to love them. I've never needed Finn to perform for me. I only ever needed him to show up. He's showing up now. Slowly, imperfectly, the way that real things grow. On a Sunday morning in March, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I picked up, it was Hugh Merritt. He'd gotten my number from the venue's event coordinator, he said, who'd kept the contact sheets from the reception. He said he hoped that wasn't too strange. I told him it wasn't. He said he thought about that evening a few times and wanted to know if I was all right. I told him I was. I told him what had happened in the months since. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "Good, that's good." We talked for about 20 minutes. He'd sold his contracting firm the year prior, was doing some consulting, spent winters in Sarasota. His wife grew tomatoes. His daughter lived in Portland. Before he hung up, he said, "You know, I've got a son who went sideways on me for a few years in his 30s. We got through it. It takes patience." "It takes patience," I agreed. "And it takes one person willing to tell the truth first," he added. I've thought about that line more than any other from this whole chapter of my life. One person willing to tell the truth first. I was 62 years old on the floor of a reception barn, helped up by a stranger who owed me nothing. And somehow that stranger handed me something more useful than sympathy. He handed me the proof that basic human decency still exists independently of the people you thought would provide it. Finn called me on Father's Day in June. Not a text, a call at 9 in the morning before I'd even had my coffee. He talked for 40 minutes. Cassandra got on the line at the end and told me they had news. They're expecting in January. I stood in my kitchen, the same spot, and I said congratulations, and this time the word held everything I had.